Hi, and welcome to Harvest Bible Chapel, Kuala Lumpur Online. We hope that the following message will be a blessing to you as you seek to walk with the Lord in spirit and in truth. For more information about our church, please visit www.harvestkl.org or click the link in the description below.
Well, good morning and welcome to all of you again. My name is Peter and I am one of the pastors here. This morning, we're going to be in one of the most well-known passages of Scripture in the entire Bible as we continue in our series through the Bible this year, as we look at how all of God's commands, how all of His laws are coming together to tell one story, not about laws and rules, but one story about God's love for us in His Son, Jesus. And so if you brought your Bibles with you today, I want to invite you to go ahead and open it and turn in your Bibles to Exodus chapter 20. Exodus chapter 20. Before we jump in, let's recap so far what has happened. Okay, in the beginning, Genesis 1:1, God created the heavens and the earth. He creates man to be in relationship with Him, but man ultimately rejects God and this relationship. And so man is separated from God and he is cursed with sin and death. Life is hard, there's suffering, and there's brokenness everywhere. But in the midst of all that, God continues to pursue His people. God gives this man named Abraham a promise that out of him will come a great nation. And through his family line, God will bless all the nations of the earth. And God eventually takes his family all the way down to Egypt, where they will eventually become enslaved, only to have God rescue them in one of the most amazing stories of deliverance recorded in the scriptures. And then last weekend, Pastor Eric preached on the Day of Atonement and explained how the Bible has three different types of laws. The first type of laws are civil laws. These are laws that govern the nation of Israel, which don't apply to us anymore today because we are not the nation of Israel. We are now the church. Secondly, there are ceremonial laws, which were laws pointing to Jesus' ultimate sacrifice on our behalf. We don't do any more of those sacrifices or partake in these ceremonial laws anymore because Jesus was our sacrifice once and for all. And thirdly, you have God's moral laws, which point to His character and His heart. And today, that's where we're going to be. We're going to spend some time in some of God's moral laws, the 10 Commandments. Now, you might be thinking, aha, you said the Bible is not primarily about laws and rules, and here we have 10. Well, yes, the Bible has rules. In fact, the Bible has a lot of rules, 613 or so, if not more. But the rules are there to show us the main point. They are not the main point themselves. Okay, let me show you. Exodus 20, starting in verse 1. And God spoke all these words, saying, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing steadfast love to thousands of those who love me and keep my commandments. Verse 7, you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not hold them guiltless who takes his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but on the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter or your male servant or your female servant or your livestock or the sojourner who is within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Verse 12, honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male servant, or his female servant, or his ox, or his donkey, or anything that is your neighbor's. Now, when all the people saw the thunder and the flashes of lightning and the sound of the trumpet and the mountain smoking The people were afraid and trembled, and they stood far off and said to Moses, "You speak to us, we will listen, but do not let God speak to us, lest we die." Moses said to the people, "Do not fear. God has come to test you. Let the fear of him may be before you, that you may not sin." The people stood far off, while Moses drew near to the thick darkness where God was. Now, we're going to go through all of these 10 commandments. Before we do, I want to give you some principles and what you need to know about God's laws. Okay, the first is that God's laws are not simply prohibitions. Okay, they're not a random set of rules of things that we can't do or shouldn't do. Okay, God is not trying to keep something good from us. That's what Adam and Eve believed in the garden when they were deceived in Genesis 3. But it is only when we live within our created design that we can actually have life, not the absence of those things. The classic example here is if a fish were to look at God and said, "God, I don't like the way that you created me. I don't like that you have restricted me to live my entire life only in the water. So you know what? God, I don't like this rule that you placed that I have to live in water. I'm going to jump out of the water and live on land." And what happens to the fish? It dies. Because God's laws are not simply prohibitions. Number two, God's laws are good and they protect what is good. Okay, God's laws were never meant to be a burden to us, right? For us to think we have to follow all these rules. There's so many rules. But God's laws were to protect life and what is good. God didn't bring the people of Israel out of slavery only to enslave them to a bunch of rules. Okay, rather, the rules were to free them, free the people of God to live rightly with him and to keep them out of slavery and destruction. Number three, God's laws reveal who God is, his holiness, and his goodness. They reveal God's character and what he values. Okay, we don't have time to go through all of the setup for the giving of the 10 Commandments, but in Exodus 19, we have the setup, and it's absolutely incredible. Okay, the people are out Mount Sinai, and there's thunder, and there's lightning, thick clouds, and smoke everywhere. The entire mountain is trembling because God has descended on it in fire. And God warns the people not to get too close to the mountain, because if they do, they'll die. And the people respond, "Yeah, we're good. We're good down here. Moses, you go up and meet with God. We're going to wait for you down here." And then in Exodus 20, 1 and 2, God says, "I'm the Lord your God who brought you out of slavery." So see, God's laws, it's only in light of who God is and what he has done that the commandments make sense. Okay, so it's God's revelation of himself through the law, through the giving of the law, and his expectation of obedience that follows his revelation of himself through salvation, through the people's deliverance. Does that make sense? He is revealing himself through the law, but it only makes sense in the context that he has already revealed himself in the way that he has saved his people. And then lastly, God's laws reveal our hearts. The Apostle Paul in Romans 7 would say, if it had not been for the law, he would not even know what sin is. Ever since the fall, ever since sin entered into the world, our hearts have longed for not the God of life, but the sin that leads to death. Our hearts desire, and they crave and delight in sinful things. And the law just simply points all these things out in us. Now, let's go through each of the 10 commandments, and let's have a little test as we go through each one of them. Okay, I want you to make a mental note as we go through each one, and I want you to think, yes, I have kept and obeyed this commandment perfectly, or no, I have broken this one. Okay, let's start from the very beginning. Number one, you shall have no other gods before me. So this commandment speaks to the truth that there is only one true God. There are no others. And this one true God should be at the center of our love and our affections. It's to keep us from being disappointed from false gods and idols. Okay, idols can be physical idols. We're going to get to that here in just a second. But it can be good things that we turn into God things. So how many of us can say that you have never loved anything more than God? That you find your greatest joy in knowing and being with him? Or that you, or do you value other things more? Like your money, your family, your kids, your comfort, your job, your possessions, your image, your reputation? Or what are you mad at God for that he hasn't given to you? Or what would you be mad at if God took something away, if he took that thing away? Those things may be your idols that you love more than God. So yes or no? Have you obeyed this first commandment perfectly or no? I'm off to a bad start. I'm 0 for 1. Commandment number 2, you shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything. Okay, this means not making or having any physical idols that you serve or worship. There's some overlap with the first commandment, which forbids the worship of false gods and idols because God is a jealous God. He doesn't want you to give away worship and glory that is rightfully his. But the second commandment also deals with worshiping the right God the wrong way. Okay, let me explain. When we try to create something physical in the place of the invisible God, we have contained and limited and shaped God into our own liking in our imagination. And this means that we have actually distorted who God truly is. God says, I am. He is who he is. He cannot and will not be changed into our own likeness. You and I don't get our own personal God. We don't get our own personal Jesus that we make into our own image, who agrees with everything that we think and does what we want. So the question is, have you ever served or worshiped any physical idols? Or maybe for some of you, it's not physical idols, but you really prefer that God wasn't the way that he is. Maybe you've said, my God would never do that. Or you've tried to excuse or explain away God's behavior and his actions in the Bible. Oh, I don't think God really meant that. By the way, this is what Satan does. He reframes what God has said about himself. He twists it so that it's no longer true, so that it's a lie. And the root of making God in our own image is that we are not satisfied with who he is. All right, that's commandment number 2. Yes or no? How have you obeyed that one? Number 3, you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. So the name of God in the Bible represents the fullness of who God is. Let's take, for example, my name, Peter. When you think of Peter, it's not just P-E-T-E-R, but those letters come together to form a name so that when you think Peter, you think of me, right? So when my wife thinks of Peter, it's not just a name, but she thinks the perfect and most wonderful husband. When my kids think of Peter, they think this is the best dad that we could ever have. Timothy disagrees. So this commandment is really getting to the heart of how we view God and how that is expressed through our words. Okay, and it's forbidden making any lesser or making nothing the name of God. It's when we treat his name with anything less than the highest honor. Okay, the easiest example of this is when you get mad and you throw a tantrum and you throw around the name of God in maybe not so holy phrases. Or it's when you say meaningless or false things about God, when you say things like God is not loving, he's not good, he's not present. And the same spirit of this law applies when believers don't walk in a manner worthy of Christ, okay? Worthy of the name Christian. Because as Christians, we take on the name of Christ. And so we also, by the same spirit, we violate this command when we do or say things contrary to who God says we are. So yes or no, how have you kept that commandment? Number 4, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Keeping the Sabbath, resting on the 7th day, is the recognition that only God is God. We are not God. But we're also not slaves to our work anymore. So our identity is not wrapped around our work. So we're to rest and enjoy our relationship with our Creator. The same principle applies to generosity. Right? As believers, we are no longer bound by the tithe, being required to give 10% of our resources. But we are to live and give generously. Okay? In the same way, we're free from the technicalities of this Sabbath law, but the principle, the heart of it remains. So, does how you work or how you rest show that you trust God? Do you rest? And by rest, I don't mean just stop working, although that will apply to some of us or many of us. But do you commune with God and give him the time in your life that he deserves? That's commandment number 4. Number 5, honor your father and your mother. This has to do with the authority that God has placed in our lives, because the father and the mother in the family unit represent the authority that God has over us. So parents, you represent God to your children in the way that you love them, the way that you teach them, the way that you discipline them. Okay? That's a weighty thing. By the way that you parent, you are discipling to respect and cherish the authority that God has over them. So one day when they are grown up, you're supposed to slide out of that role and they're to submit and walk with God themselves. Okay, by the way, this commandment also includes taking care of your elderly parents. And all the parents in the room said, amen. Okay, I'm not even going to ask how many of you have obeyed their parents perfectly. I've been a kid. I've got 4 kids. It's an automatic no. Fail. Okay, commandment number 6, you shall not murder. This command prohibits the unjust taking of life because it's protecting the sanctity of life, because everyone is made in the image of God. Okay, some of you guys right now are celebrating. Yes, I've never killed anyone before. But Jesus said, if you've ever had a hateful thought towards a person, if you ever lost your temper and had an outburst towards someone, if you've ever thought that someone is lesser than you, that they are not as human as you because of their ethnicity, how much money they have, their education, or anything else that cheapens or disregards the imago Dei, the fact that they are made in the image of God, then you have committed murder in your heart. Man, I thought I had one. Finally, close, but still it's a no. Number 7, you shall not commit adultery. This command, again, protects the dignity of every person made in God's image in God's institution of marriage. Okay? It upholds sex as a good gift within the God-given bounds of marriage between one man and one woman. Now, I don't know about you, but most of my life growing up in church, I was taught that sex was a bad thing. It was a dirty word. We don't talk about that. That is an incorrect view of sex, at least according to the Bible. Sex is a good gift within the confounds of marriage as God has created between one man, one woman for the rest of their lives. Okay, the analogy that I'll give for you to understand that is like sex is like fire, okay? Outside of God's given bounds, outside of fire within good boundaries, fire can be a bad thing. You don't want your house burning down. But if you have a fire in your house in the fireplace, which I don't know that we have that here in Malaysia. In the US, where I grew up most of my life, we do because it gets cold. Fire in my house is not necessarily a bad thing. It's a good thing. It gives us warmth. But if my house is on fire, that's a bad thing. That's how sex is. Sex is a good thing when it is understood and it is enjoyed within the ways that God has allowed us to in the institution of marriage. Now, again, some of you are thinking, I got this one. I'm good here. I've never cheated on my spouse and I'm single, so I haven't even had the opportunity to commit adultery. Bad news. Jesus said that if you've ever had an inappropriate sexual thought towards someone who is not your spouse, even if it was just fleeting for just a moment, that you have broken this command. And that applies not just to men, but to women as well. All right, now I am 0 for 7. Number 8, you shall not steal. Pretty self-explanatory, right? That's pretty clear. But this commandment is more than just don't take things that are not yours, okay? It has to do with revealing our dissatisfaction. Why do we take? And also it has to deal with generosity. The late Pastor Tim Keller, he said, you have not stopped being a thief, biblically speaking, when you have stopped taking. Rather, you have stopped being a thief when you start giving. Meaning, when we don't give as we ought, when we can give and when we should give, and when we don't, we are actually stealing from others. And it's not so much about how much are you required to give, but will you withhold generosity or will you be generous? So can anyone say, I've never taken anything that is not mine? And oftentimes, we think more of physical taking, physical stealing, but it can also be stealing credit for something you didn't do, stealing glory from God or from others, or something so harmless as sharing passwords to services that is only meant to be for you. Guilty. Or again, not giving when we should. Number 9, you shall not bear false witness. This commandment protects the truth and values honesty so that others don't suffer unjustly. Okay, the reason we often do this is because of our insecurity. We lie so that we can look better or make others look worse so that we look better. Okay, bearing false witness includes hiding the truth, bending the truth, framing it in a way where it casts you in a better light or someone else in a worse light, exaggerating the truth. It includes gossip, for sure, talking about people behind their back, usually involving made up or exaggerated stories. It includes white lies, lies that don't exactly tell the whole truth, but we do it because it doesn't seem to hurt anyone. Okay, so has anyone in the room never lied before? That was a trick question. If you said yes, gotcha. Number 10, last but not least, you shall not covet. This means not desiring what other people have and you don't have. It's to teach us contentment and satisfaction in God, to not despise what God has given us for want of what he hasn't given us. The things that we covet, they promise us so much that we're going to be happy. We're going to have so much joy. We're going to be fulfilled, but they never deliver on those things. And our desires for those things often spiral out of control and lead us to make really irrational and destructive decisions. Have you ever desired someone else's car, their home, their job, their success, their family, their beauty, their skills, their education, or maybe just their life? You look at their life and say, I wish I had their life, not mine. And the root of that is that God is not enough for us, that we feel like we need something more to be happy. So those are the 10 commandments. 10 commandments. And Jesus would say that all of these 10 commandments and all of God's rest of his commandments, including these 10, can be summed up into these 2. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. Hey, that's all the laws of God are. How we are to relate to God and how we're to relate with one another. You can see how the first half of the 10 commandments have to do with how we relate to God, and the second half, how we relate to one another. Okay, so how did everyone do on the test? I don't know about you, but I'm 0 for 10. Okay, no one should be feeling particularly good about themselves right now. And if that's the case, good news is coming. But if you still don't think you're that bad, I'm not as bad as other people or so-and-so, it's in some ways very normal for people to minimize their sin and how bad their sin really is. But God doesn't. He doesn't minimize our sin. Our sin is wickedly, infinitely wicked to an infinite, holy, and righteous God. Jeremiah 17 says, our hearts are wicked, deceitful above all things. Who can understand? Our hearts are more wicked than we can ever know. And there's absolutely nothing we can do about it. We can't just try harder. We can't become more educated. We can't fix it. And so what you're actually saying when you say, I'm not that bad, or when you say, my sin is not that bad, what you are saying is, God is not that holy for my sin to be that serious. And that is a serious problem. God says in 1 Peter 1:15, I want you to be holy because I am holy. You see, our God, our Creator, demands holiness. And his promise to his people as he gave the law is that if they would keep his laws, then they would be blessed. They would have life. But if not, they would die. And so Israel agrees to these terms and conditions. They seem very reasonable. Listen to God, you have life and blessing. You don't, you die. Pretty clear. But you can't just generally be good before God. You have to be perfect. You have to keep the whole law perfectly to have a relationship with the holy God, and any single violation is worthy of death. Galatians 3:10 says, "For all who rely on works of the law are under a curse. For it is written, cursed be everyone who does not abide by all things written in the book of the law and do them." Now, it may seem harsh, but any single violation is a representation of failure of the whole. Meaning, if you fail at one, it's not unfair that you get punished as if you failed at all obeying all of God's law. When you fail at one, it is showing you that you have failed at all of them. So why then would God give us the law? In some ways, you might think he's just setting us up for failure. That's not very nice of him to do. But God initiates this covenant because of his desire to be worshiped by his people and to dwell with his people. This is what it would take for us to have perfect holiness before God. And ultimately, God would make this covenant with his people, even though he knows that they will never be able to keep his law. And that's exactly what happens to the rest of Exodus and Numbers. In Exodus 32, as God has given Moses these 10 commandments, the people of Israel have built a golden calf. Moses is angered, and he takes these 2 tablets of stone, the 10 commandments, and breaks them down at the foot of the mountain because they are worshiping this golden calf. In Exodus 34, Moses asks to see God's glory, and God graciously allows him to do that. But then he's also given the second tablets of the 10 commandments. And then the rest of Exodus and Numbers, you're going to see the people complaining over and over again. They're hungry. God gives them manna. We don't want manna. We want meat. He sends them quail. We're thirsty. God provides them water. And they send spies into the promised land that God promises to give to them, and the people rebel. So the entire first generation that saw God do amazing things, they saw God split the Red Sea and give them salvation out of slavery from Egypt. They are all denied entrance to the promised land, including Moses, except for Joshua and Caleb. So what's the solution? What's the solution to this problem that we cannot fix? Because the people of Israel, we have also the 10 commandments, but they're breaking them constantly and they're wandering in the wilderness. And then in Numbers 21, we come to a really fascinating story. Look at it with me. Numbers 21, verse 4. From Mount Hor, they set out by the Red Sea to go around the land of Edom. And the people became impatient on the way. And the people spoke against God and against Moses. "Why have you brought us up out of Egypt to die in the wilderness? For there's no food and no water, and we loathe this worthless food." Then the Lord sent fiery serpents among the people, and they bit the people so that the people of Israel died. And the people came to Moses and said, "We have sinned, for we have spoken against the Lord and against you. Pray to the Lord that he will take away the serpents from us." So Moses prayed for the people. And the Lord said to Moses, "Make a fiery serpent and set it on a pole. And everyone who is bitten, when he sees it, shall live." So Moses made a bronze serpent and set it on a pole. And if a serpent bit anyone, he would look at the bronze serpent and live. But that's kind of a strange story, right? The people of God are complaining against him again. They despise his grace and the way that he has saved them out of slavery and his provision in the manna. And their complaining becomes self-destructive. God decides to judge them, and he sends fiery serpents, which are symbols of death. And that sounds pretty terrifying. I don't know if that means that the snakes looked like they were on fire, or if it meant like when they got bit, it felt like you were on fire. Either way, it's a bad situation. And it's even more strange in that all the people had to do to be healed was to make their way to look at this bronze serpent. Can you imagine that? You're suffering from fiery serpent bites, and the solution is to look at this bronze serpent. It's not some kind of medicine. It's not some kind of venom, snake venom antidote. Because the people rejected God's provision in life through the manna, the bread of heaven, they were given a symbol of death. But in God's grace, like he so often does, as he does over and over in the scriptures, he takes the curse, he takes death, and through it, he brings salvation. So that all it took was the faith to trust God's word, that just going and looking at this bronze serpent, that it would heal them. You see, our problem is that we didn't just need a new set of tablets. We didn't need more laws, because rules could never save us, because they don't fix our imperfect record full of sin, and they don't change our hearts. And that's the problem with works righteousness, to believe that we can somehow, by doing good, become righteous enough before God. We can't. Galatians 2:16 says, "Yet we know that a person is not justified by works of the law, but through faith in Jesus Christ." You see, we were all dead in our sin. You and I were like the people of Israel, bitten by the curse of sin and dying as unrighteous lawbreakers before God. We needed a new record and a new heart that loves God and truly desires righteousness to follow his laws. Right? We don't need commands to do the things that we love. You don't have to command me to love my kids, to hug them, to give them kisses, because that's natural. It's why we needed a new heart. The laws of God are like a mirror. They show us what we actually love. We were created to love God and keep his commands, but we rebelled against him, and were given the law to reveal the true nature of our hearts, that we don't love God as we ought. And this is how God fixes our problem. Look at these two verses with me. Galatians 4:4-5 say, "But when the fullness of time had come, God sent forth his son, born of a woman, born under the law, to redeem those who were under the law, so that we might live, so that we might receive adoption as sons." And then look at Romans 3. "We are justified by his grace as a gift through the redemption that is in Christ Jesus, whom God put forth as a propitiation by his blood to be received by faith." This is what we mean when we say that Jesus lived the perfect life we can never live. See, Jesus did not come to abolish the law. He came to fulfill it. Jesus followed all of God's commands perfectly because he loved God perfectly. And he didn't have some kind of unfair advantage. He emptied himself, and he was tempted just like us in every way. And this perfect record of righteousness is what he gives to us. It is why it's called gift righteousness. We didn't earn it. It is a gift that he gives to us. And this perfect record of holiness before God is what gains us a right standing before the Father. See, God demands perfection, but he supplies it for us in his son, Jesus. He gives us a new heart that loves and obeys God as it should. But it came at a great cost. It wasn't free. Look at what John says. Chapter 3, verses 14 and 15. "As Moses lifted up the servant in the wilderness, so must the Son of Man be lifted up, so that whoever believes in him may have eternal life." Galatians 3, "Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law by becoming a curse for us. For it is written, 'Cursed is everyone who is hanged on a tree.'" You see, all of God's laws in Numbers 21 are showing us that Jesus is our ultimate mediator and intercessor. See, Moses relayed God's law to us, but Jesus would fulfill it. Moses stepped in and prayed for the people for God to relent, not to destroy them, but Jesus stepped into our place, taking our curse and death, the wrath of God that was meant for us, and he took it upon himself as our substitute. He himself would be the one who would be lifted up on a cross, the symbol of death, that all who look on him and believe in faith would be saved. And through Jesus' resurrection, he gives us victory over sin and death, so they have no more power over us. See, it's not by our doing and keeping of the law that we save ourselves. It's simply by having the faith to believe God's word. All you have to do is look to Jesus. Look to him for forgiveness. Look to him for salvation. Look to him for life, and you will live. All you have to do is look. Do you feel overwhelmed and ashamed of your sin? Look. Do you feel depressed, like life is not worth living? Look. Do you feel unloved and unseen? Look. Do you feel lost and without hope? Look. Do you feel like you can't live up to expectations and you keep failing? Look. That's it. Look. The gospel is that simple. So if you're a believer here this morning, I want to give you a verse to encourage you and a challenge. The verse is Galatians 2:20. It says, you may be familiar with it. For I have been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. The life I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself up for me. We, as believers who are saved by grace, we do not somehow now earn God's favor and approval by works. Okay, if we have been saved by grace, then it is only grace that sustains us and enables us to walk faithfully with God. And then the challenge is for us. The challenge is for you to take up Jesus' mission to save. We as believers, we have the gospel, and we have to steward it and share it with boldness. If we don't, we are withholding the only news that can give people in our city and in our lives eternal life. Okay, this mission is not just for pastors, but it is for every single believer to invite and to plead with people to come and just look at Jesus and believe him for healing and for life. If you're here this morning and you're not a follower of Christ, maybe you've never heard the gospel before, this is an easy way that you might be able to comprehend the gospel. All other religions say do. If you do enough good works, if you're a good enough person, then maybe you'll have done enough for God to be happy with you and you can be saved. But God says, you can take all of your good works and all of your righteousness and present it before me, and it will never be enough. Your good works are tainted by your sin. But the gospel tells us, instead of do, it has already been done for you. Jesus has already done everything necessary to save you. All you have to do is look to Jesus. The gospel is the good news that you are so wicked that you deserve death. But Jesus loved you so much that he took your death for you so that you can have life in him. Romans 10:9 says, if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and you believe in your heart that God raised them from the dead, then you will be saved. That is a hope that we all have, that God offers to us in his Son, Jesus. So the question is, what are we going to do with that? And how will we respond? So I want to invite you to bow your heads right now. If you are a follower of Christ, you are a believer, and you've received this good news that Christ has saved you by his death, I want you to just soak up that Christ lives in you. How amazing is that? How much joy should that produce in our hearts and in our lives? He loves you and gave himself up for you. But if you're not Jesus this morning, I want to invite you to surrender your life to him. His invitation is for you who are broken and weary, who are helpless and lost in your sin, to come to him, to look to him for healing and life. He will not turn you away. That is the very purpose for which he came. He took on flesh and laid down his life. That is to save you and to give you new life in him. So will you receive that this morning? Father, I thank you for this incredible news that we who were lawbreakers, we were condemned to die because we chose to be your enemies. We chose to be lawbreakers. That when we were dead in our sin, you loved us so much. You showed us your love by sending your son Jesus so that we might be saved out of that condemnation, that we would have eternal life. God, I pray that we would cherish that as your people. And I pray that we would steward this good news of the gospel, that we would proclaim it, that we would invite others to come to look and see Jesus and find life in him. We pray all this in his name. Amen.